Hey there, everyone. Welcome. In today's video, I've got something totally different for you. I'm here today with my husband, Peter, who is a tarot practitioner. And together, we're going to take a look at the cycles and symbols that are active over the first few months of 2023. Peter's going to come at it from the tarot perspective, and I'm going to share just one big astrological insight for each of the first 3 months. So January, February, March. So welcome, Peter. Great to have you here today.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm excited that we're doing this. This is going to be a lot of fun. And hello, everyone. Maybe I'll just a little bit. Can I just say a little bit about myself? So, my name is Peter. I've been working with the tarot for quite some time. Way back when I was a teen. I think everybody in their teenage-ness tries to look for a way to be eccentric, and mine was to discover the tarot. The passion just grew from there, and I had actually started a professional practice, I think somewhere 2004, 2005-ish, before you and I met. I taught and spoke at conferences. I taught from, I always say a repurposed and rewired educational leader. So I love learning the tarot. So I've learned from, I think of James Wells, and I think of, Joanna Powell Colbert, I think more recently of Susie Chang as well. So my connection to the tarot, I think, goes further back than my connection to any other kind of learning or work of passion that I have. So I'm really excited that you and I get to have this chat today.
Yes, I know we've talked about it for a long time because we've always had this kind of shared mystical, I guess, woo-woo component to our relationship, where you've always had the tarot and some of the pagan wheel of the year, and I've had astrology, and that crosses into the wheel of the year material. So yeah, it's great that we're going to do this. And I know we're going to take a look at January/Capricorn season. Do you want to lead us off with your thoughts about that time of the year from the perspective of the tarot?
I will. And I'll actually talk about two different symbols. So the first one I'm going to talk about is actually, we'll call it the card of the year. So because tarot is a numeric system, often practitioners will break down the upcoming year numerologically. So I think it happens in a variety of ways. To be honest, if I was thinking, I think Mary Greer is probably where I first learned to kind of break this down. So the card of the year for 2023 would be 2 + 2, which is 4, + 3, which is 7. And the card number 7 in the major arcana is the Chariot. Now, I kind of prepped myself a little bit, Cal. So I actually have big giant cards since tarot is a visual medium. I have cards from, I think it's the Giant Radiant Rider-Waite Smith deck. So this is the Chariot. This would be the card for 2023. Although you can probably Google the cards or search for them. The images are pretty much everywhere. And like the name says, the year, kind of the theme of the year. So the card of the year sort of gives us a theme to focus on over 2023. And the Chariot is a card of movement. It is about movement and travel, but this is where, I'm going to kind of link the correspondence between the tarot and astrology, which I sometimes think they work really well. And sometimes I think they must have been a bunch of people sitting around a bar on a Friday night, because they sometimes make no sense whatsoever. And this one, we have the Chariot that corresponds to Cancer. And Cancer isn't necessarily associated with movement. We think about a crab, we think that movement doesn't happen quickly from point A to point B. Sometimes it's sideways movement, sometimes it's backwards movement. And I often think that the Chariot moves in the same way. So if I looked at 2023 before we kind of look at the January focus, I would say 2023 is going to be a card of movement. It might not be swift movement, though, but it might have the perception of swift movement. In the same way, a Chariot kind of drives forward. We can think that we are also driving forward, but like the crab, we may not be going quickly. So, if I'm thinking about that energy of 2023 and the card of the Chariot, if I can, talk about that briefly in one area, it would be perception of movement, perception of swiftness. So, but I am going to shift because if we're focused on January, I'm going to look at the card that is correspondent to kind of most of January, and that's the card of the Devil, which corresponds to Capricorn. And little tidbit with the Devil, if I was going to highlight the symbol, I would say that the Devil represents our restrictions and our addictions. So, if we're focused on that area of January, this is that time where we think about our overindulgences, where we're aware of our interests that, kind of might drive us to be overindulgent, to be focused on material things, to kind of move away from what might spiritually drive us and be tempted by those quick fixes. So, and again, I said I had the images, and I'm just going to pull this one up too, so people can sort of see. These are almost classic images. So this is the image of the Rider-Waite-Smith Devil card. You can see the idea of restrictions are actually shown well in the card, with the two characters that actually come from another card that are kind of associated with another card in the tarot, the major arcana, that are associated with the lovers. We can see they're actually bound to the throne of the Devil. So just again, to kind of repeat for everyone, if I was focusing on January / that, most of Capricorn season, I would look at our restrictions and addictions, those things that really do cause us to overindulge and to move away from a more spiritual focus and really drive us into material things. So
what you're saying is there's a focus on material things, like we're really focused on what we're addicted to or being bound by our addictions with that Devil card to Capricorn.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I always think, for me, I always think that, the images of the tarot are ways to sort of look for the tarot symbols in real life. So it would be that time where we're aware of our overindulgences. It's not to judge them. It's not to say there are times when we need to overindulge. It's not to say that it's necessarily a poor choice. It's a time where we need to be aware of the spaces where we do that. Yeah.
Is that like, when you get your credit card bill in January and you're like, oh my gosh, I completely overspent in December, or you go to put your regular work or everyday clothes back on after the holiday break and you're like, oh, this is a little bit snug around the middle, or whatever it happens to be.
That's,
so
what?
Yeah.
No, you go ahead. Sorry.
Is that kind of what you mean by being aware of addictions or seeing the consequences of them?
Yeah, the Devil card would be a really great image, would be us sitting there in January with people having the buttons undone in their pants because of the overindulgence that may have happened. That's a great way to place that.
Okay, cool. So the Devil card is linked to the sign of Capricorn. So that really starts around the 21st of December and goes through until, I think it's about the 22nd of January.
Yeah.
Or 20th of January, actually. Yeah. Okay. And so to then add in some astrological symbolism to that time frame, I mean, this is going to go in a different direction because I'm going to work off the transits that are happening. Mm-hmm. And there's some really fun astrology happening in January. But the thing that really stands out for me, I mean, I did have like a tie and I have to choose one. So I'm going with Mars station direct, which happens around the 12th or the 13th of January, depending on whereabouts in the world everyone is. And Mars has been, retrograde in the sign of Gemini. So it's been going backwards since late October. So there's been a little bit of going back over territory, dealing with these like irritations or frustrations that have kind of built up. And with Mars stationing direct around January 12th, there's this sense of like, okay, now we're going into kind of second chance mode or cleanup mode. Now we're putting things back together, or we're finding a new way forward. And that shift with Mars, it doesn't happen until the end of the second week of January. And then it's going to take a few days to really start to get moving. So I think, for people thinking about the new year and new plans and goals, 2023 is a little slow to get started, with Mars being, so close to stationing direct that he's really still at the beginning of the calendar year. So I think second week, third week of January is when there's that first sense of like the wheels are turning, heading forward into the new year.
It's interesting that you talked about, because I know we're when I'm talking correspondences, the correspondence is linked to the zodiac signs, so they're not quite linked to the calendar month. But when I go to focus on the next card, which is kind of linked to Aquarius, it really actually does almost say the same thing, that the card, which is the star, which, you know, I'll hold up as well, is really a card with where a keyword would be hope. We talk about hope and vision. So in a lot of ways, that's exactly that. It's like, you know, we're sort of, you know, sluggish and bound during the devil season, and it isn't until the star kind of moves us towards an area of, I actually have can I share? I've got a name for I think the star is the Ted Lasso of the tarot. So it's almost that optimistic visionary that, you know, when I think about, you know, I feel like I just fell out of the lucky tree and hit, you know, every branch on the way down or whatever it is. And then I ended up in a pool of cash and Sour Patch Kids. Like, it's almost that, that idea of optimism, you know, and it's visionary because, you know, I think Ted Lasso was a visionary for, you know, people who may not be aware, you know,
it's a character in a show. Yeah.
Right.
It's a beautiful show.
It's a fabulous show. He has a real sense of almost being overly optimistic, but, you know, hope and belief is the underlying drive to all of his actions. So, you know, as we kind of shift into that star area and we sort of move away from the first 3 weeks of the year and we go into that Aquarian, that star correspondence, we really start to step into that optimistic, visionary perspective, almost to the point that our caution, the one caution, you know, because I always think when I kind of look at tarot cards, I think, well, you know, what is not best case, worst case scenario, because the cards themselves are static, but it's like, well, you know, where could I see this card in strong aspects of my life, and where could I see this card in challenging aspects of life, or where can we see them? I would think that the star card is a card that perhaps causes us to be aware of sliding into naivety. So, you know, we have the idea of hope and optimism, and we just need to make sure that what we don't do is, you know, become so optimistic that, you know, that we're naive. So
yeah, we're so optimistic that we're absolutely in the realm of things not being realistic. So it's interesting. So yeah, so the Aquarius card you're saying is the star that kicks in around January 20th. Which will be, you know, Mars will have been stationed direct long enough to start to make an impact. And there's a new moon in Aquarius just the very next day, January 21st this year. And it's a really optimistic new moon. So it's so interesting that you say that. It's an optimistic new moon because it has a sextile to the planet Jupiter in Aries. So yeah, that kind of bright, shiny energy. And it's interesting too, because I've really come to appreciate the quiet stillness of the solstice since I moved to Canada. So, you know, at this time of year, December, January in Australia, we're coming into the height of summer season, you know, long days. It's also the start of the summer holidays. So like January as a month in, you know, Australia and other like really warm southern climates, it's like holiday month, you know, it's when schools are shut down. It's the bright time of summer. And so there isn't a lot of productivity, but there is this openness. Whereas in the Northern Hemisphere, when December, January is winter time, there really is that stillness or that closed in or that sense of being bound, like when you're saying with the devil card. And it's not until we get to this late part of January where the sun goes into an air sign that we do start to get a sense of like openness or looking forward. I've always found it really interesting too. Chinese New Year is timed to the second new moon after the solstice. And that most years, that's the first new moon in Aquarius, this sort of, you know, new moon in Aquarius, which in 2023 is January 21st, but it can happen, you know, anytime in Aquarius season. And it's interesting to me that that's the marker for Chinese New Year. So there's some acknowledgement that as we shift out of the sun in Capricorn period and into the sun in Aquarius period, that there is more of an openness or a forward looking. So what you're saying with the star energy, it's a beautiful kind of resonance, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, that's where I think, and I talked about that earlier, where sometimes the correspondences, or at least elements of the correspondences, certainly makes sense. I mean, I'm sure that's why esoteric societies developed this system of corresponding, astrological planets and signs to the tarot cards, both major and minor cards.
And the minor arcana. Yeah. And when I look at the astrology of February, it is a very open, expansive month. And there are two really important astrological things that I think contribute to that. One of them is that we're going to have Venus in Pisces, which is just a generally supportive, connected. It's like a healing and feeling, but it's really about spiritual and creative nourishment. And there's a real kindness and compassion that Venus in Pisces can have. So that actually starts late January. We're well into Aquarius season when that starts, and that runs for most of February. But my big astrological sort of signature for February is that Jupiter will move past its retrograde degree from 2022. And that's a little bit of an obscure, like astrologically technical thing. But basically, it means that by the middle of February, Jupiter is pushing into new territory in Aries, this very kind of bold, active, make it happen kind of sign. And so it just feels to me like if Jupiter, the planet of growth and expansion, is for the first time in months going into parts of the zodiac that he has not been in for more than a decade, it feels very much about the future. And it's Jupiter in a fire sign. So it's lively, enthusiastic, it's motivated, it's bold and courageous. And so Jupiter in Aries, we did have a big chunk of 2022 from May to October where Jupiter was in Aries, but only just in a little part of Aries. And in February of 2023, Jupiter now kind of goes further into Aries and takes that initiative, get things started, take a risk, go for it energy. It takes it wider, it kind of spreads, and it asks us to go further. So that's really interesting that that's all going to happen while we're in that star period.
Yeah. It's it is interesting how they connect. So
yeah, I'm really excited. And I think, that shift of Jupiter in February around the middle of the month past its station degree, to me, that's where it really feels like 2023 is kind of kicking in. Yeah. And so then you'll have a card for Sun in Pisces season.
Yes.
Don't give me a car, but take a card instead.
Yeah. So the card for kind of Sun in Pisces is the moon. And it's interesting because you would have thought that, and I'm just going to pull the card up so that people can kind of have an image, and the image almost in some ways, highlights what really is the complexity of this card. And this is a card, I won't say of contradiction, but it is a card of duality. It is reflective. So it's that idea of, either our light that's turned within or light that originates from another source, in the same way the moon, has no internal light, but reflects kind of the light of the sun. The moon card is really about, reflection on other actions. So I always think, when we're reflecting, we're not acting, we're actually, we're thinking about things that are either to be done or that have been done. So in some ways, we're kind of using the light of another source, which is exactly kind of, where the moon comes in. I find it interesting though, that the correspondence that is linked to the moon card is actually not the moon itself, that it is Pisces. So the other, almost keyword or idea that links to the moon is that idea of duality and contradiction. So, ideas like, war and peace or love and hate, it's those universalities that kind of oppose one another. These sort of reside, inside the moon as well. And, and I think about all the water that might be associated, with Pisces, and then the mutability that's associated there as well, that kind of idea of non-containment, almost, that real flow of water, the fact that, to hold water in, we need to actually put it inside a container.
It needs to go in a container.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not a self-containing thing. But it's interesting you talk about the duality, because that is really at the heart of the zodiac sign of Pisces. The symbolic representation is two fish tied together, but heading in opposite directions. And so there really is like, are we going up or down? Are we going, high or low kind of thing? And so that sense of duality is really embedded in the zodiac sign of Pisces.
Yeah. And And what about the astrology for the type of
Yes.
now I'm curious to see.
Yeah,
if
well,
there's
it's funny
anything.
you talk about this duality because the month of March 2023 is the standout month of the whole year. And, you know, there's so many major astrological things happening. I won't speak in detail about them all, but I'll just mention them so people know. We've got Saturn moving into Pisces. So that's a huge new cycle beginning. We have Pluto temporarily dipping into Aquarius, which is like a preview of what's to come over the next couple of years. And we also, in the shorter cycles zone, we have Mars leaving Gemini, moving into Cancer. And even though that's more of a shorter medium-term cycle, Mars has been in Gemini since August of 2022. So that brings to close a cycle that began in the middle of 2022. Saturn moving into Pisces, I think, is the really defining one for 2023. There is, you know, things to say about Pluto in Aquarius and Mars in Cancer. And I will talk at the end of the video about where people can get more, you know, of both of our offerings. But in terms of, you know, our video today, I was like, okay, well, if I can only talk about one thing, it's Saturn in Pisces in March. And this is important to me for so many reasons. Since December of 2017, we have had Saturn in one or another of the signs that Saturn rules. So December 2017 was when Saturn first went into Capricorn. And since then, it's either been in Capricorn or Aquarius, which are both signs that are in traditional styles of astrology ruled by Saturn. So we've had this very strong Saturn energy for, you know, 5.5 years or so. And that's a lot. It's a lot of Saturn energy for such a long period of time. And so there is a softening or there is a malleability kicking in with Saturn coming out of one of its home places. So that seems striking. And then Saturn coming into Pisces, you know, it's a whole different sign here. It's been 30 years since Saturn has been in Pisces. That would take us all the way back to the early, I'm like, is that the early to mid 90s? I sometimes go too far, but it is. Yeah.
Most of us don't go far enough. You say 30 years and some of us say, oh, that's 2005, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But no, I think it's the mid 90s. I probably should have checked, but so that's interesting. And then Pisces, as we were just talking about, it is a sign of duality. It's a sign of transition. It's a sign where things are not stable, but they are malleable or flexible. Things are fluid here. And so there's been a lot of rigidity that we've been dealing with collectively, socially, politically over these last 5 years. And it's going to be really interesting to see how things start to kind of soften. There's some things that have been really rigid that could do with the softening. And there are other things that we really rely on that we don't want to get, you know, softer and more malleable. So I think like every astrological transit, there'll be good and bad about it. But it's an important transition to note because March of 2023, Saturn will be in Pisces for about 2.5 years, and it's just going to be in Pisces. So if you are a Pisces or a Gemini or a Virgo or a Sagittarius, which are all what's known as mutable signs, you're starting a new chapter around maturity that is going to require a mix of consolidation and restructuring, as well as like re-choosing commitments. And so, yeah, that's the very brief version of Saturn in Pisces. But in terms of the lay of the land of 2023, it is a month where new chapters and new focuses are coming forward. New priorities are going to emerge through March, and things that you've been really focused on or had to really put a lot of time and effort towards over the last 3 and 6 years, you're going to find yourself moving away from them. So I guess the takeaway is March is a month for restructuring based on emerging priorities, emerging commitments, and there might be a little bit of endings that goes with that.
Interesting too, with endings, because with, you know, and think of the zodiacal correspondences of the tarot, that idea of the moon actually ends those correspondences. And although it doesn't end the tarot, that it's Pisces, which is the last sign of the zodiac. And then, you know, we don't go back. When we go back to Aries, we're actually going, you know, all the way back almost to the beginning of the major arcana again. So interesting.
Yeah, so interesting. Yeah. And I think, yeah, it's a really interesting time of year to have that. Saturn will move into Pisces around, I think it's about the 7th or 8th, 6th or 7th of March. So a bit before the equinox, certainly like right in the middle of Pisces season. So by the time we get to the sun in Aries, the equinox, which is like the big, you know, birth and New Year cycle, there's new things to focus on for the year, or different things, I should say. Yeah. Okay. So exciting. Anything else that you want to share about these next few months?
No, I wanted to really talk about, the idea of just a key sort of symbol for each card. And I think the best way to go about doing that is, through the symbols of the major arcana that are associated or correspond with each of the zodiac symbols. Probably different ways we could go about it too. We could have, taken a look at the cards that rule each decan throughout that time. But no, so nothing really to add from that perspective. No.
Okay, great. And one thing I know we had meant to do at the start of the video, which we'll do now, is where can people find out more about you and your tarot services, consults, offerings, and things like that?
So the easiest place to find me would be at my website, and it's just Peter White, which is, kind of a nom de plume on my last name, and tarot all combined. So peterwhitetarot.com. That's where you'd find me as well on Instagram at Peter White Tarot, and also find me on Twitter at Peter White Tarot. Right now, and until January 31st, I'm actually looking to offer a year ahead reading. So, a way to be able to focus on the year of the Chariot. So that idea of moving forward, to be able to offer that. So those are 90-minute consults, and you can find that on my website under the consultation tab. And those are available to be booked until January 31st. So that would probably be, the biggest thing that's up and coming for me from a tarot practice. And I wanted to say too, I really enjoyed this conversation. I just wanted to say, I really enjoyed this conversation today. So thank you.
No, it's great. I know that you love talking about tarot and you have so much to share. And I hope that everyone has found this interesting. We will include a link to Peter's site in the show notes below. And of course, my site info is there. If you are looking for more details about the astrology of 2023, I have a webinar coming up in early January. So we'll put a link for that below as well, if you want to join for that. And if you have any questions or comments about the video or about tarot, just let us know in the chat below, in the comment section below, and we can keep an eye on those for future videos. But thanks for being here today, Peter, and thanks to everyone watching.